Hello, and thanks for joining us today. In today's episode, we're going to explore the role that content plays in SEO. I'm Paul, and I'll be your host. And joining me today is Ken and Ian, our resident marketing experts. So, we're going to talk about content's role in SEO. Content is king, but what type of content will work best for you, and what's involved in successful content creation? So, Ian, what are some of the components of successful content?
Yeah, and I know we've talked a bit about this in the past episode, so I won't go into this too deep, but always remember strategy first. If you don't know why you're creating content, then you have a problem, right? So one of the things you should be thinking about even before you think about the components, and I think it's good to take a little bit of a step back, is what's the purpose of it? Because your content really should be attracting, engaging, and converting visitors, and ultimately turning them into customers if possible. So I think one of the first things you have to think about is that it's all about creating content that people are looking for related to your products and services or business. So you need to know what information or content your ideal customers are looking for. If you don't think through that stuff, you're going to go off the rails so fast. And of course, that right there leads to the next thing you need to think about is who is your audience? Who are your ideal clients? Who are your ideal customers or patients? Because if you don't have those parts down, those components, you won't be able to get it right. And you'll ultimately be investing in creating content that will serve very little purpose for you. But then, I think this is where your question was leading, Paul, was, what are some kind of tangible components once you understand why you're creating it, who you're creating it for, what the purpose is, how it fits strategically in your marketing plan. What kind of content are you going to create? What type of content, meaning, are you going to be creating pages, posts, audio, video, infographic, case studies, checklists? Like, content comes in a lot of different flavors. Some of them have different power from an SEO standpoint. But one of the interesting things is that when Google comments about Google reps, when they comment on what type of content you should be producing, and I'll talk about content length in a second, but Google is all about relevance. They're even suggesting at a very base level, you should be producing content that people care about. And that, I mean, you can't get simpler than that explanation. And the people that care about it that you want to attract, right? So some other things you should be thinking about is the reading level. The average reading level in the US is grade 7 or 8. And it's pretty similar in Canada as well. So think about that too, because some people try to get really, really wordy or scholarly, or they like to prove their expertise by the words they use. But if that's not what your ideal client wants to consume or feels comfortable consuming, because there is a place for that. Like if you're a B2B business and you're trying to attract physicists that their whole mind and what they're looking for is expertise in that realm, or engineers, or, if you're B2B trying to attract dentists who use a particular product, you have to get pretty specialized, right? But for most businesses that we're talking to, small and medium-sized businesses, you need to be speaking at the right level. Content length. So you need to consider, well, how much content should I be producing? Meaning, if I'm producing a page or a post, what's reasonable? What's going to help me from an SEO standpoint? And so the two key, and Ken's going to go into more detail about some of this, but the two key audiences are Google, or the search engines, and that's what SEO, that optimization is for. And then the people you're trying to attract, your audience. So again, what Google cares about as far as content length is how much content does your ideal customer need to read in order to fulfill or satisfy the intent of their search. That's really, has Google mastered the art of sending traffic to those sources? No, probably not. But that is their purpose of content length. And they've stated that. So oftentimes you'll hear marketing experts talk about like your blog posts, your pages should be about 1,000 words in length. Other ones even go so far as to say 2,000 to 2,500 words in length. So ultimately, it also depends on your competition, right? If your competition has virtually blank pages on a topic, and I've seen this, you guys have probably seen this, and then you come in and you write really, really good content that's 700 to 1,000 words in length for a particular service, you'll knock it out of the park because the competition is so low in your local community.
There's kind of a lower level threshold though, too, isn't there, Ian? Where, I mean, you've got to have a certain amount of content before there's even enough content for Google to, and the search engines to really figure out what that page is all about.
Yeah, I mean, you need to. So we've talked about
signals
in
content,
Yeah, and I think the key here is signals is just one framework or like a way to think about what your website is doing from an SEO perspective to help Google send you traffic, right? So think about it as sending signals to Google. You have to send enough signals. There has to be enough content there in order to include the keywords and the content that people are searching for, the information people are searching for. So, my threshold is actually 700 words. I feel like if we go below that threshold, we're in dangerous territory of having thin content. Other people say 500 words. I don't know what your thought is, Ken, but 500 words is not a lot of content.
No, I mean, I think certainly, absolutely no less than 500 words.
Yeah.
And what's staggering is how many websites you go to and you look at the pages and how many pages have well less than even 500 words. And yet they want to rank for search,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and the other, if you flip it around and think about it from the consumer or the business standpoint that wants to hire you, if you don't say enough about your service or your product or your business, who they're hiring, what they're hiring you for, you leave a question in the user's mind where they don't have confidence that you can do what that you say you can do, right? Like if you leave too many questions in the user's mind, you're at a disadvantage already, and you don't want to do that to yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I think the way I like to look at that is, communication gap. When if you leave a communication gap, it will be filled, and it will probably be filled by something that is not optimal for your business. Whether it's politics, whether it's websites, and business websites, even relationships, leaving content gaps is a really dangerous thing to do.
Yeah. Just some other things to think about. Frequency of posting, like as you go into this, what's a sustainable rate of posting that you can do, of producing content? You don't want to do it in fits and spurts. You want to have consistent content production. Are you going to source your content from places? Like who's going to help you produce your content? It's all very important. I mean, as this is the one I run into a lot, is that most business owners, they're experts in their business, right? So they think, well, even if I'm not really a great writer, although a lot of people do think they're half decent writers, at least that's my impression when I speak with them, that the thing to remember is, assuming your SEO works, your marketing starts to take off, you start to get busier. You may not be super busy now, but as you start to get busier, are you going to have sustainable time to keep producing your content? And usually the answer is no. It's a very simple, when are you going to, Mr. or Mrs. Orthodontist, when are you going to have time to write blog posts, right? And I've run into this all the time. And so usually we can convince people or just help them understand, like it takes a lot. And this isn't your superpower. Your superpower as an orthodontist is to help people with their teeth. It's not to write content. And our content writers are much better, more efficient, and they'll do it, optimized for SEO. So, real world proof, you should be thinking about that, and make sure that, you're focusing on, one of the things we see as a common issue too is B2B businesses thinking more from a B2C standpoint and B2C thinking about B2B. So you need to be really clear. Again, it's all about who your audience is. So be super clear on that stuff. And if you start with strategy and if you do these things, you're going to be off to the races for sure.
So, Ian, what about like B2B versus B2C?
Tell me more about that question, Paul.
Well, when you're writing content, if you're and you touched on this, but if you're a business to business as opposed to business to consumer, is the content that you produce different?
Yes and no. I mean, to me, maybe I've been doing this so long that it's simpler to me than to some business owners, and that would make sense, right? A familiarity to it and consistent delivery makes you pretty, just comfortable with things. But what I would say is it's all wrapped around the audience, right? If you know the audience, so in a B2B audience, they're radically different than a B2C audience. But both sides, we've talked about this in past podcasts, both sides want to make two types of decisions. They want to make an emotional decision and they want to make a logic decision. And so in both of those types of audiences, because those are audience types, right? B2B versus B2C, you need to help them have the logical support and the emotional guidance, and I can explain that more if we want, but you need to resonate with their emotions and help them affirm those emotions with logic. And if you can do that, both of those types of audiences, you will do well. I don't know if that's enough of an answer, but
yeah,
I just find I've been in the industry so long, I find the B2B marketing folks overcomplicate B2B marketing sometimes. And it's only, I think, because B2C marketing is so much more commonplace. But I've spent a large part of my career in B2B marketing, business to business marketing, and it's not complicated. It's just you have to, and I think this is the biggest gap, and that's why I tried to clarify it at the beginning. You have to know your audience. If you don't know your audience, all of this is wasted effort.
I think, Jen Kelly used to talk a lot about this when she was on our podcast. When you're talking about B2B, you're likely to be dealing with multiple decision makers.
Yeah.
And so you need to understand who are all those decision makers and what content do you need to have at what level, for them. So an executive is not going to read, most executives, most, CEOs are not going to read, a 5,000 word case study or a 10,000 word case study. They're going to want to see executive summary type content, things like that. But the technical manager may very well be the person who wants to read that content. And so you need to write very technically for them. But for the executive, you need to have an executive summary. For HR or a CFO or somebody else in the organization who might be a player and a decision maker, maybe it's very much less technical, but more talking about in general how you solve a problem in the context of what makes sense to them. So I think there's more complexity oftentimes in the content that you have to create for B2B than B2C. But that's not always the case.
Yeah, and the one the one thing that makes me think of that I probably didn't talk about at the beginning of this, but it's involved in the strategy, is thinking about content from the marketing hourglass, or another way to term that is the buyer's journey, right? So that is where B2B versus B2C differs a little bit. It doesn't differ radically. It just means that the buyer's journey is know, like, trust, try, buy, repeat, refer, right? That's the marketing hourglass, which parallels the buyer's journey. And in the B2B, so that's really, really clear in the B2C world, the business to consumer world. In the B2B world, I think you just have the exact same marketing hourglass, but you have supporting content, meaning you now your role at the very beginning of the process is to win over the initial decision maker. So they've been tasked with finding a solution. Your goal is to do the know, like, trust try with them, but also to equip them to become the internal representative or salesperson or expert on your services in
Advocate.
order to then equip them to take that to the next level decision maker. But again, what I was talking about, emotion and logic, totally applies to both types of scenarios, right? You
Right.
really have to think through that process.
Yeah.
So it's more about, what supportive content can you produce in the B2B world that will help the internal buyer sell it internally to the other stakeholders.
Yeah.
Ken, I think there's a lot of misinformation or outdated information about this. That's why I'm asking this question. Should you create content for people or for search engines?
You should always write for people, but you always have to know that you also have to structure the content to make it easy for the search engines to figure out what it is and what it's all about, and get it indexed. And when you do it right, when you know the principles of on-page SEO and you understand, you have to think like a publisher. If you think like a publisher, that really gets you down the path of writing good content. It's going to give you structure. It's going to give you the headline structures, the H1, the H2, the H3, etc., that the search engines want to see. But it also helps your user skim the content and navigate the content, because most people, when they land on a web page these days, they skim it first. They look to see, is this answering the mail, the problem that I have? And if something picks out they pick something out and it jumps out to them and speaks to that problem, they're going to read that section in more detail. So it's really a balancing act. But if you know how to write content well for SEO, and also how you lay that out properly on a web page so that it's easy to skim, it's clear. Like if you're going to write a blog post, common thing, to get blog post, seen by and read by people, is to provide some clue in that title that it's helping them solve a problem. And a big way to do that is 7 tips, 9 do's and don'ts, anything that just immediately says, oh man, I'm going to read this, because chances are, if they are telling me 7 of these, there are 2, 3, 4 of them that I don't know. And so that's great, because it's going to improve the dwell time, and it automatically signals to them that, that this page is going to be valuable. Now, when they get on the page, if they can't follow that structure to easily pick out the 7 things that you're telling them, or the 9 things that they shouldn't be doing, they might very well abandon it. I do it all the time. I mean, I go to a web page and it's like, holy crap, I don't have time to spend trying to dig my way into the weeds through this to figure out, what it's really telling me. Adding visuals, creating white space, all of that stuff is really important from the user experience. That directly doesn't have anything to do with SEO, although pictures do, because you can add alternate text. And the alternate text is a component that tells the search engine what the picture is. They can see there's a picture there, and they're starting to get better, but they're still not quite there where they know what a picture is when you have it on a web page. And it's also important for accessibility, for ADA compliance and things like that. But yeah, you want to lay out your page properly. And again, as Ian mentioned, you've got to think about what is the buyer's problem, what are they looking to solve, where are they at in that decision-making process, the buyer's journey, or the marketing hourglass stages that Ian, so accurately described. You've really got to think about that. So that's why one of the reasons why blog posts work really well from an SEO perspective, because we live in a world where people are starting to put questions in as their search, or they're speaking questions into their mobile devices, asking and expecting to get search results that way. When you do that, it's actually what we call a long tail keyword phrase, meaning, it's not just plumber city, it's, kitchen cabinet painting trends for 2023, that, now that whole thing, that whole question really has become a long tail keyword phrase. And so people, have been searching differently. I think we talked last podcast, or maybe the one before, about, the volume of brand new searches that have never been searched before that are logged by Google is just staggering. And I think that's driven predominantly because people are becoming more sophisticated users. And they're using mobile devices. They're asking questions when they're doing searches instead of just typing in, a couple of, 2 or 3 word phrases. Now, there are pages that you create on your website if you're a local business, and this is really what we're focusing on here, is content for local search, that really they're written honestly more for Google. They always should be written to be appealing and to be easily read by humans. But I'm thinking about specifically location pages. I mean, they're just really a cast of supporting pages that kind of help prop up your overall SEO. Those pages may rarely get visited, but in the HubSpot, when they launched and they talked about this concept of inbound marketing, the more quality pages you have on your website, the more likely it is that you're going to be found. You're going to get more links. You have more pages for Google to index for more search phrases. If you do it right and it's architected properly, it can be a real powerhouse. As Ian said, if you just write content without strategy, willy-nilly, just to write it, that actually can be confusing to the search engines to say, I don't know what this site's really all about. It's all over the map. It's got some stuff over here, and whatnot. So I think that's really important. The other thing is, as we were just talking about, this idea of gobbledygook is really important. You do not want to fall into the trap of using overly jargonistic language. And so too many people, when they write their own content, they write it for what they would look for, what they know to ask. But most people, and this is where, I think B2B is frequently different, where a lot of times you have to educate people that there is a new solution that's available. Whereas, more of the B2C stuff may be more straightforward. It's like, I've got a leaky toilet, that's pretty straightforward. People know how to ask about how to find a service to go find that. They've been doing that for a very long time. But, and I'm sorry, I'm a little bit all over the map. But what you don't want to do is you don't want to use such technical language or your own internal language that you use to communicate with your team and your other peers and things like that, at the expense of customer X not having a clue what you're talking about. And so now it's not to say you probably need both pieces of content on your website. One that speaks to that general audience that doesn't really know what the solution is. And then also content that speaks very clearly to the people who know that what their problem is. And so, for example, we're working with somebody in the medical profession, and they operate almost all of their businesses by referral only from other physicians. And so, they need to have technical terms on their websites because the patients that are being referred to them are probably doing a search for somebody who can do some pretty, technical or sophisticated medical procedure. And so that's what they're going to be typing into the search. But there are also people who may not know enough to really describe that. And so it's like, I've got this pain in my side, what do I do? And so you depending on the nature of the website and who you're trying to attract and who your ideal customers are, you might need to have content that is very educational, that just helps people kind of get a feel. It's like, okay, well, maybe this is somebody that can help me. Maybe I need to call and schedule an appointment, or at least, have an initial conversation. So you just, like Ian said, you really have to frame it with strategy. You have to understand who your ideal customers are. And then you have to have content that's written accordingly. And when it comes to structuring the content, unfortunately, most of the time what people are sold from an SEO perspective is on-page SEO. which is basically the blocking and tackling level SEO work that needs to be done. And yeah, it's important. You need to have your meta titles and your descriptions and your alt text and your headers and your anchor text or links to either external websites from your website or internal pages. All of these things need to be done well. You need to have schema markup, all that kind of stuff. You can certainly do a lot of that, but if you know that structure and you create really good, effective page templates, like, I'm sure, Ian, you guys do it, we do it, where we know there are just really good formulas and really good structures of ways to write content that accomplish both speaking to the person, but also speaking to the search engines and being effective with both.
So, Ian, without content, there's this thing out there called PageRank, and without content, you can't have PageRank. So, what is PageRank, and what is some of the things that determine that?
Sure. So PageRank is actually the original Google algorithm, and it's been around since 1998. In fact, it's been around longer than Google's been around, because the two founders patented it before they started Google. But really, what it is it's and before actually I explain a little bit more about it and why it still matters today, is that Google has actually come out very recently, like in the past few years, because the industry asks, is this still relevant? Is this being used? And they've actually come out and said PageRank is still being used. It's still relevant. The overall algorithm that's being used to rank pages has gone far beyond this. But this core part of the algorithm, PageRank, is still around and still being used by Google to rank web pages. And really, its main focus is to determine, to rank the page on a website, because websites aren't ranked, pages are, right? So that's an important thing. We've talked about that before, but I think that's often overlooked. And it's really to determine what's the strength of a page in Google's views. And two of the main things, and I'll explain some other things that might be relevant too, but two of the biggest things that Google's looking for, and this is how it all started, this is how the Google algorithm began, is it all had to do with internal linking and external linking. So how do your pages interlink with each other, and the strength of those linkages, and we'll talk a little bit about hub pages and why those are so important because of this. But then external links, like backlinks to your website, are really, really vital, because in the original algorithm, as it evolved, PageRank was actually shared with the pages it was linking to. So if you had a high PageRank page linking to your content, it would essentially share that Google juice, that Google power, with the linked page. So traditionally, from a website standpoint, this is really powerful, because you could raise the perception of how valuable the information on your website is by focusing on links, right? How you do that is by producing great content. How you do the internal linking structure, like we've talked about hub pages before, and that's actually a linking strategy of linking associated content that supports each other, supports a primary topic, and passes power to it from these other pages or posts, right? So if you have a page on your website called The Ultimate Guide to Choosing a Plumber, or to a plumber in St. Charles, right? That's and then you have all these associated posts that are like, how to fix a leaky faucet in St. Charles. That's interlinked with that ultimate page. How, there's so many posts that can support that,
Right.
like sewer backups, check valves, septic tank. I mean, it goes on and on and on, right? So you're trying to push that power to that main page. And that just helps Google understand, wow, this is an authoritative piece of content because all of these supportive pieces of content are pointing to it. And then when you can add to that external links to it and external links out to authoritative sites, it just gives extra power. So some other elements you want to consider related to that are the frequency of the keywords on the web page. Like, Ken and I were chatting a little bit about this earlier on in this podcast, but if you don't use the keywords that people are searching for related to the topic of interest that they're looking for, they're not going to find it. Google's not going to be able to have those signals match up. Now, Google's pretty smart. Like, the algorithm can use synonyms and associated topics, but you have to include those keywords, or you're not even catching that or grabbing that low-hanging fruit. Location keywords on the page, right? If that example, if you're in St. Charles and you're a plumber, man, you better be using the word St. Charles and some of the associated area towns around it. You need to use it in headlines and subheadings, body text, meta descriptions, alt text, right? The key is that you don't want to be overly manipulative. You want it to be natural, because Google is a super smart algorithm. And also because we're going after those two target audiences that Ken was talking about, the robots and the people, it needs to be natural to read too. It can't be like super clunky. Just some other things, like how old is your web page? That plays a factor. If you're a brand new website, you're at a disadvantage to a website that's been around for 10 years that may have some of these other elements in place. So it's going to be a work in progress to steal away some of that rank share, basically. We talked about linking. Some other tips are focus on the topics that are relevant to your local area. So as an example of this, we're working with a crawl space encapsulation company that's in a particular area of North Carolina. They have particular challenges in that area because of just the weather patterns and some of the bugs there, and right. So you need to be focused on the particular problems people are faced with in your particular area so that you can speak to those. The reason, again, why you want to do that is because that's what they're searching for. They're searching for a solution to those problems. Yeah. Make sure your content is well written and informative. Promote your content, right? Promote it on social media. Again, it's all about getting more eyeballs on it that are looking for your service, that will spend time on your pages, that will engage with it and ultimately convert, right? But that, though, just understanding that a little bit will help. Again, PageRank is an old, in digital years, it's ancient, but it's incredible that it's still used and it's still relevant today. And that, again, you're not trying to game the system, but you are trying to play by the rules that essentially Google has put into place and not overstep those rules. You can be certainly on the edge of those rules, but be careful not to overstep them, because a lot of people do that. They try to game the system, and Google's not dumb. They figure out how people are gaming the system and they update the algorithm. And then those websites are essentially, they are reduced in ranking because Google doesn't like you gaming the system. So,
yeah. A couple of things I'd like to say about keywords, because I think, a lot of people just immediately think, okay, SEO keywords, especially if you don't know a lot about the depth of what is really required for SEO. There are tools like WordPress has got great plugins that help you do SEO, and kind of bake that onto your page or into your page. Yoast SEO, all-in-one SEO, tools like that, Rank Math. But the thing is, just because you get your grade right on that page, it doesn't mean that that's what Google is going to index your page on, because it's going to look at the overall content. And yeah, you may be able to get everything green, or most everything green. That still doesn't mean that you're going to rank for that keyword phrase that you put into your focus keyword phrase. So that's one point I wanted to make. I mean, and so it's like, just because you write a structured page, and that's really what these tools help you do, is just make sure you get good structure to give you a really great chance at ranking. It's not enough. And so you still need, that's why, SEOs still needs outside review and evaluation on a regular basis. It's not a one and done kind of a thing. The other thing is, a lot of people, they want to write content over and over and over again about the same keyword phrase. And, they kind of bastardize their performance of any of their pages because they're trying to get all of this content to rank for the same keyword phrase. And so again, you have to do content by design. It has to be architected and thought out and executed as a system, instead of just, oh, I'm going to write a page about, this. I'm going to write, and then I'm going to write a page about this, but I'm going to use the same keyword concept, and that's really what I'm going to try to rank for. So those are a couple of things, that huge mistakes that I think a lot of people make.
And Ken, I love it that you brought up the talk about Yoast and plugins, the garbage in, garbage out, right? I'm sure you guys have landed a client, and part of the discussion is, I don't know what's wrong. Like, all of my Yoast scores or my rank math scores are brilliant. And then it takes us, who understand what's happening, 2 seconds to look at it and go, well, but every page is targeting the same keyword. So you've created huge keyword cannibalism.
Right.
So Google doesn't know.
I think I said bastardization,
like,
but it's cannibalism.
Where do we send traffic to on this topic?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then, the point about understanding which keywords, that's why we incorporate, and you guys incorporate, keyword research into this overall strategy. Because if you don't know, like, you can make educated guesses for sure. Every business owner could probably sit down and hash out at least a seed list of 10 to 15 keywords that absolutely people search for, just because they're in the industry, they hear the questions people are asking. Those things are excellent parts of seed lists. But until you actually use a keyword research tool and you start pumping out, like, well, what are the main keywords related to, how are they sorted by volume of searches in your area, right? We have access to that kind of stuff. What are the related keywords? What are the questions people ask related to those keywords? I mean, this is not like a 5-minute, plug in one term and have it spit out a list, which is what a lot of kind of online, plug and play tools will do. There's kind of experience and expertise that goes into this to help draw out what are the keywords that matter most to you, and then also considering the intent of those keywords. And that's where these tools have gotten more sophisticated too, and Google has gotten more sophisticated, is Google cares about the intent because the searcher cares about the intent. So as an example, in the accounting world, we have accounting clients, CPA clients. There are an awful lot of searches related to the term CPA, because that's an informational term. It can be commercial as well, transactional a little bit. But if somebody were looking for CPA in my area, that right there is starting to tell you, okay, that person is actually looking for a commercial intent, a transactional intent. And so as a business, you need to be focused on why people are searching for the content, produce content for that intent so that you can create those signals with Google, attract more people, boom. And this is we haven't really talked about this, but SEO is never ending. It's an investment in your online property. And if you're doing it well, that investment will reduce cost per lead over time significantly, and help you show up for more searches than your competition. So you're stealing market share from them and not losing market share to them. And your business will continue to grow. But it is not a one and done. And anybody who sells it like that, or as Ken has said on previous podcasts, if they're selling it for $99 a month, it's probably not going to get you the results that you're actually looking for from a business standpoint.
Yeah. And even if it's right now, we're in a market where it's probably not even enough to keep a sustainable level and expect to continue to get the same results. everything is getting more expensive. Everything is getting more competitive. The shift to digital really ramped up, a couple of years ago, and it's accelerating. And so even if you were spending a decent amount on an SEO budget 2, 3, 5 years ago, if that budget has maintained its level, you're probably losing ground. And a lot of people, I know that's a tough answer for a lot of people, but it's the reality, folks. And we've talked about on this podcast, SEO is your best long-term strategy if you're able to make the investment, and it takes the investment. I mean, you've got to be able to make the investment level to make it work for you. It's going to give you your highest return on investment and your best performance, and it's putting it into a property that you own and control, unlike so many other places online. So that's enough about that.
So this internet fad thing is here to stay, huh?
Probably.
At least for a little while more.
One thing I'd throw in there is that, because someone asked this question of John Mueller from Google, there's this thing called, within the SEO industry, used by these tools, whether it's SEMrush or Ahrefs, domain.
You're going to say authority score, aren't you?
Yeah, domain authority. And someone asked John Mueller about that, and he said, Google does not rank websites. And this was back to the page rank thing. He said, Google ranks web pages. So he said, Google does not have anything called domain authority. We have something called page authority. They still use it. It used to be available for you to see. Now they're hiding it. But just know that the Google algorithm does not rank domains. They rank, or websites, they rank pages. And
now, just to clarify though, because this is where we all geek out in this topic, is if
domain authority can be useful because it's an aggregate of what all the pages on your website are doing, but it means nothing to Google.
Right, except where they align is that if the page rank of pages on your website are strong enough as a whole, they will give extra page rank to each other. So in essence, that aggregate rating that we call web authority, page authority, domain authority, like it's not mystical. It's trying to take what Google does and give us a single, because page rank used to be visible. You used to actually be able to see the page rank of every single page you visited. That went away. Right. And so this is the industry trying to then understand, well, how does my website as a whole, how is it viewed by Google? And I agree, sometimes I find their comments a little, it's like a corridor, right? They stay within the corridor of the question, but they don't want you to understand the bigger picture sometimes. They don't tell you a lot about the algorithm, is what I'm trying to say.
Right.
And they never will.
No.
So, Ken, gone 45 minutes here. So what are some of the most common types of content, and when and why might they be used? Are there times where you wouldn't want to use, are there certain industries that may not want to use a certain type of content?
Okay. Well, so websites, traditionally are built typically with web pages and usually blog posts. A lot of people, include blog posts in their web page structure. They're very similar. They're designed to do a little bit different function. So web pages, you're going to have your home page. You're going to have your about page. Those are two really critical pages to pay a lot of attention to from an SEO perspective, because those are probably the most visited web pages. And so you need to think really long and hard about those. Then you're going to have services pages. What drives me nuts, or product pages, if you're selling individual products or product families online. What drives me nuts is a lot of times people will write a single service page, that's just generic for, plumbing services. And then they have bullet points where they have a 2-word description of drain cleaning and, emergency plumbing and hot water heater installation and all that. And then they wonder why they don't rank when somebody's trying to do a search for, you know, hot water repair in my city. You didn't give Google enough content to help you rank for that phrase because you just put it as a bullet point with 2 sentences on a generic services page. So those you need to have a page for every important product or service that you want to be found for. I think you should have a page for every location that you want to be found for. Whether it's a service area business or whether your customers come to you, but they're still doing a search for somebody local. We call those location pages. There are landing pages. Typically, landing pages, you by design, you don't try to rank those because those are where you're driving traffic to specifically with the intention of getting conversions. Although in some cases, maybe you do want to rank landing pages, but those are kind of the web pages in general, contact page, things like that. Blogs are written, really because they give you the ability to kind of start to demonstrate that you have that expertise and authority. It's they're the kind of pages that are going to be much more likely to be shared and much more likely to be linked to from other websites, which is huge because linking from other websites still is an important factor in search engine optimization. Shared through social media. A lot of times people will share a blog post out on social media because they think that blog post, 7 ways to determine if it's time to repaint your house, is a valuable piece of information that they want to share with their community. You can put content on social media. Social media is not necessarily going to help you rank per se, but it is important from an overall visibility perspective because, it may be the way where people are kind of skimming through a social media feed and they see something about your business and hopefully the social media content you have can help drive traffic to your website. So, it's not that they're going to Google and doing a search, but they may be more serendipitously finding you by scanning through a news feed, and that's why a lot of people also choose to run ads on social media platforms because they're hoping that they can kind of hijack somebody just, as they're kind of perusing to get them over to, investigate a solution or a service. Articles. So you can write third-party articles, which I think can be a really great strategy. And I think we ought to bake in, doing guest podcasting into this as well. We talked, I think, last week about, writing an article for the local chamber or an association or membership that you're a part of. And then, if you do it right, you can actually write your own inbound link to content back on your website through that article. And you get a link from a highly relevant website back to your website, either because it's local, because it's part of the chamber, or it's authoritative because it's part of the industry or association that you're a part of. So that's a great strategy. Writing content, for the more technical crowd, like the B2B crowd, typically, white papers, maybe play there. Case studies, before and after project descriptions. If you're more, like home services, anything, marketing is ultimately about transformation. And so if you can show, people's state before and how after they consumed your product or service, what their life is like afterwards, if you can, document that transformation in written content that can be indexed and searched by the optimized by the search engines, but also in a way that wants to be consumed by people looking for that information, that's very powerful. Infographics is really the visual representation to kind of do the same thing. It kind of paints a picture, right? And it shows people, okay, here's this problem. Here's the percentage of people who also have this problem. Okay. And oh, by the way, they did this. Oh, okay. And it just kind of makes it, we remember pictures much more quickly and longer typically than we do any written text. So infographics are a great way to pack a bunch of information in that's easily digestible. Then, just honestly, a lot of times what you need to do is you need to continue to promote the content that you create. not writing it is not enough. You have to get it posted out there on social media. You have to send it out to people who want to read your email newsletter. Contributing to other industry sources or local chambers to share information and maybe be a part of their newsletter, all to drive traffic to your website. That's all very important things to do. The audio and visual aspect of content, great. People love to consume podcasts. They love to consume videos. I think where you can take that and turn those into real SEO assets is, first of all, make sure you're posting your video onto YouTube, because like we talked about last week, it's the second most searched site on the web. But also transcribe the video or the podcast, create show notes, create summaries, but also maybe even do the full transcription, which is what I would recommend, because that's fantastic SEO content. People are going to watch the video or they're going to listen to the audio, but Google's going to crawl and consume the full transcription. So take advantage of those. Same thing with webinars. And with webinars, you can actually take one webinar, 30 minutes, an hour long, whatever, break it into multiple pieces of content that, again, you can put onto your website that are SEOable. And so webinars are fantastic. Plus, it's just great content that a lot of your ideal customers are going to want to consume in a really nice, easy to consume format. Press releases, we use a press release strategy. It's not your traditional press release strategy, because all of the SEO goes to the big behemoth PR companies, PR websites. We use a system where we publish the content first. We distribute it on sites that say, yeah, we'll post this, high domain authority. And we use it as a way to build our own quality links back to important properties like our Google business profiles or our website pages or blog post pages. Because again, it's all about signal generation. You need to do things and put content in places that are going to help stimulate the signal generation. That's ultimately what SEO is becoming. Some of that happens just because you publish it on your website and it's crawled, but most of the time it's because you have to help the signals along. And you do that either because of the quality of the content that you write or the way you promote your content, just hugely important. I think that's pretty much it. I mean, I would say a lot of people are like, oh my God, how do I create all this content? And it's like, I'm going to tell you, and I think this is probably a topic for our next episode or another one or two down the road. You're natural content creators. You just aren't capturing it and you're not using it effectively for SEO purposes.
Yeah, there's a lot of different types of content out there, and this is a long and involved topic. So, like you said, we'll probably have to revisit it on future podcasts. So, I think this is probably a good place to wrap up. We're almost at an hour here. Ian, you want to take us out?
Sure. Before I do, I just want to say I love two words that Ken said today. First of all, he introduced the term serendipitously, which I thought was awesome. And then SEOable. So awards to Ken for bringing in interesting words for us today. I loved it.
Well, what about keyword bastardization?
There we go.
I'm trying to get that term to rank.
I love it. It'll get there. So thank you, Ken, Paul for leading us in this. This was a great topic. Look forward to the next topic. And thank you for joining us today. I hope you get a lot of value from this. Please remember to share it with friends. We love, as our audience grows, we love having more influence and exposure. And also, until next week, you must keep calm and mark it on.